1. Until recently, I worked at a very large children's hospital in the southern US. I am also transgender, present myself as female at work, and identify with my female pronouns and name. I've been doing this for 6 months now openly. If you've kept up with US politics recently, we're pretty much a target in politics at this point for every nut job who wants to make a name for themselves. My employer started out promising inclusivity, but since December has become far more toxic and far more hostile, including telling me to never correct anyone who misgenders me and to stop presenting as female at work. I had made an effort to separate myself from several people who had made it their mission in life to harass me for my transition. One of whom had told our director that she would beat the shit out of me if she caught me around her at work. Others had gone so far as to dig up social media and FetLife accounts and spread them around people at work. 6 months of continuous provocation and intrusion in my life had taken a toll. And I had a particularly hard shift one night, where I was deliberately mistreated and insulted. I made the mistake of venting about my dysphoria on Facebook, and talking about mental illness and depression in EMS. I had completed my shift at Job A. I do not represent my employer on social media. I don't even have pictures of me in uniform for a reason. And I clocked out and started to go home. I was actually in line to get food for my female partner and I to have a sit-down dinner with her when I had my phone ring. It was dispatch, and I figured they thought I might have stayed late to chart, so they were calling us to see if we could take a late transport. They informed me that there was a police officer looking for, and that they needed to talk to me regarding a case. The dispatcher found it odd they used my dead name, and even asked why they would know that. Since the officer had threatened to go to my house and arrest me if I didn't come back, I headed back. I made a phone call to my partner to make contact with police friends of ours, should I not call in an hour. As I pulled in, I immediately noticed things which made me very uneasy. Keep in mind, this is where I worked. Everyone knew me for years, and I was in uniform and presenting as female. This was an unmarked vehicle, not a DUI vehicle, regular unit, or a field supervisor. Probably investigation or narcotics based on the way the officer was dressed. As I walked back in, I was directed to the back ER, where this officer awaited me. Me. Hello, officer, how may I help you? Him. Are you... My dead name I never go by. Not even my legal name. Me. Yes, I'm... Real name? How can I help you? Him. Is there someplace private we can talk? Instant red flag, he wants to isolate me. Me, sure, let's go out here. Out of the patient care area I work in, so that we don't cause a scene in front of patients and family. I stopped at the elevator. It was a public area, well-traveled, and with a camera. I wanted a witness to what I felt was about to happen. Me, may I ask what this is about? It's pretty highly irregular. I get called back to work to talk to an investigator. He protested where I was talking to him, and I stood my ground and told him this was fine. I was not comfortable being alone with anyone right now. I'm going to be blunt. You have people who are concerned enough about you to call me, and I want to take you somewhere that can help you. Will you let me do that? At this point, I'm freaking out. Why did this guy think this? Why was he here? I noticed his patches. He's K9. The co-worker who said she was going to beat me was married to a K9 cop. It was becoming clear. Me, no, I will not. Am I under arrest? Him, not at this time. Me. Then I'm exercising my Fourth Amendment right to walk away. This conversation is over. Bye. I turn to move around him. He steps in front of me and puts his hand on his gun. If you try to leave, I'm arresting you and having you involuntarily committed. I can't guarantee you aren't going to kill yourself. I stopped. I actually laughed. Really? this was happening. Let me start by saying the threat of being sent to our local mental health center for clearance is terrifying enough to me as a trans woman. There are very well-known horror stories about being stripped of dignity, dehumanized, having gender identity invalidated, and someone attempting to convince him he was insane at clearance because of dysphoria. All of the horror stories, the feelings of violent threats and poor care, all of that came rushing into me. It was clear now what was going on. This guy had tried to get me alone to give him probable cause to arrest me and take me to a mental hold. Me, if you touch me, I will sue the shit out of you and your department for violating my rights. I am not suicidal. I am not going to harm myself or anyone else. And I am not under arrest. I am not going to sit here in my place of employment and have my psychiatric issues with my gender dysphoria treated as if it makes me a threat to anyone. You are not a physician, you are not a psychologist. Do not try to diagnose me. I took a step back at this point, wanting to put distance between him and I. This guy is staring at me at this point, laughing at me. He easily has a foot of height on me and is used to intimidating people. At this point, I can see only being led away in cuffs, thrown in a mental hospital, and made to look insane. I'm terrified. Him, well, if you just admit that you need help for how you feel, I can take you to people and resources that can help. Why won't you just come with me? He's laughing at me at this point, sing-songing. There are people starting to watch us, thankfully. Patience and security. He notices this and becomes increasingly more insistent. My blood is boiling at this point, fear and anger. I am getting help. I have an attending physician and a psychiatrist treating me for gender dysphoria. I do not need your help. It's like it suddenly dawned on him between his insistence on calling me sir, pet peeve, and the fake respect he gave me each time he barked at me to try to intimidate and assert dominance over me. Him. Why are you angry with me? I am only trying to help you. He feigns concern. Me. I am angry with the way people treat me. You are a convenient target for that anger because you are sitting here calling me suicidal and mentally unstable. I'm sure you understand it's not personal. He shows me a picture. It's a Facebook post where I had openly talked about how dysphoria is an insidious and disgusting thing. How it can make you suicidal and self-loathing. I'm trying to explain dysphoria and what it is, and he's grinning at me, looking at me as if I'm crazy. I finally stop, take a deep breath. I'm not saying any more to you. I want to go home to my partner and enjoy the 6 hours off I have before I have to work job B on a 911 truck. Either arrest me or let me go. I will not consent to you civilly committing me for expressing my feelings. Then look me in the eye and tell me you're honestly not suicidal. Me, I am not suicidal. He should not have been able to have that post. It was restricted view. He gives up finally. He had lost his isolation and is now being witnessed by multiple people. He takes my license and information. Great. Now there's a record of me as an EDP in the county database. Wonderful. As soon as I get my license back, I turn around and walk off. Have a safe night, officer. As I walk back through to my car, people can see I'm furious. I'm humiliated, embarrassed, hurt. I'm terrified he's going to follow me, try to arrest me for some trumped-up reason. Had it not been for a paramedic friend talking to me, I'd never have made it home. I was so scared. The next day, I call to file a report about the incident and complain. There is no record. No call put in the dispatch computer, no record or report of any contact with a police officer. He had done this as a personal favor to another K9 cop, completely off the record, which scared me even more. What if he had taken me? Would I have even ended up at the hospital for 24-hour hold? I have since resigned my job and am working for a more inclusive and tolerant company. But I had to end up flagging my home address for swatting with the local police department. due to someone repeatedly calling in false armed party and suicidal individual calls to my residence for the next week. 2. In 1995, I shared an apartment with my eldest brother. I was only 19 at the time because my parents had moved to the Midwest to take care of my grandmother. My brother worked nights at a hospital. Being his first job in a hospital, he often would try to pick up extra shifts to make more money, so he was rarely home. Being his little sister, I felt like I lived with my dad, and he often kept tabs on me and made sure I was safe, etc. It annoyed me a lot. So while he was at work, I could do whatever I wanted, come and go as I pleased. I was free of any rules most of the time. It was great. Until one early morning. I was an avid runner and worked out constantly at the gym with my boyfriend and friends. I was also going to college and had an active social life. The night before, my boyfriend and I stayed at the gym until midnight, and then went to his parents' house where he lived. We studied for a few hours, and then I decided that I'd better go home because his parents wouldn't have wanted me to spend the night, and I had to be at work in a few hours. I was pretty exhausted. I drive home very tired, nearly falling asleep at the wheel. The morning was calm with a thick layer of fog blinding the road. I concentrated and woke up a bit to drive the 10 miles. As I approached the gate to the apartment building parking, I click it open. It opens slowly and I drive in the second my car can fit through the gate opening, headed for my tandem garage parking space. The fog is still really thick, and it was especially dark that night. We always had lights going out in the parking area, and the light in the garage was dim and scotty. I was really annoyed because I had to grab my gym bag and all of my school books, which were tossed in the back seat. I'm collecting all of these items as quickly as possible because it was cold outside, and I was groggy. I get my legs out and lock up my car and shut the garage door. I rustle through my backpack to find my keys to the gate and apartment. As I am getting them out, I drop them to the ground, losing the hold on my backpack. I say something like, "Shit," and pick it up. At the time, I hear some shuffling near the building as I'm slowly approaching. I didn't think much of it because it's an apartment and people are coming and going, as they do in big complexes. I have the key ready to unlock the security door. To the left of the door is a large tree and some plants, and a bright security light. The light was not on, which was fairly common there, as I mentioned earlier. I open the gate slowly and step in. That's when I feel it. A force pulling against my hand. I'm now scared, thinking what the fuck is going on. I pull harder, trying to pull it close to lock it. And then I hear a man say, "Hello, little girl, let's play," and some other stuff like that. I'm strong and my legs are like super steel muscles. I pull harder as he is pulling the door to open it. My hand is slipping from the door from sweat and fear, and then place my left foot on the side of the gate and pull the door with all my might. Click, door locks. I scream loudly as he keeps saying, "Little girl, little girl." I can barely see through, but he is stark naked. I scream loudly at this point and run like hell to my apartment. I call 911 right away, and they send a police car. They check around, and in my garage, and find nothing. A couple hours later, after not sleeping, I just wanted to go to work to get away from that apartment. I go cautiously to my car, carrying a knife on my side. I get in safely and start driving the 5 minutes to work. As I'm driving, I see him. The guy. I could tell it was him because of the blonde hair and the wrinkles I remember seeing through the security door. He was hanging out on a lawn in front of a church, just sitting there. As I drove by, he made contact with me when I showed to take a second look. I freaked out and kept on my way. I told my boss when I got to work, but didn't call the police. I really should have, but I was young and dumb. I then found out from the apartment manager that the lights didn't have an electrical problem, but that someone kept knocking the lights out, breaking them repeatedly. I can only imagine how many times that man watched me come and go during the late nights and early mornings. 3. I am a 25-year-old female, and last year I took a job in sales at a rental car facility near a major airport. The job was stressful at first, but it really did get better. We have a contracted company that does our detailing and shuttling of the vehicles back and forth from our lots with our vehicles, as we are allowed in a certain amount of spaces at the facility. Anyway, this first incident happened after I finished a shift at the counter at 10 p.m. Typically, we close up the counter upstairs and head to a lower floor to clock out, and someone from the contracted company will shuttle us across the street where our vehicles are parked, as employees park in the same parking lot as many of our vehicles. Due to the fact that I was new, I was not familiar with all of the workers from the contracted company. I did, however, recognize who is their shift supervisor. So I clock out, and before walking away from our booth, a guy parks a vehicle right next to it, gets out and sighs loudly. He turns to face me and says, "Oh man, would you believe this? First she says she wants a full-size car, and now she wants a compact." I can tell he is agitated, and this is nothing new, as customers can be very picky about their vehicles. I shrug and reply, "That sucks. Well, what can you do?" I then smiled at him and walked over to the supervisor. As I'm asking for someone to take me to my car, the guy from earlier rolls up in the vehicle and says, "Hey, I'm headed over there now. Hop in, I'll take you." So I got in the car, assuming he worked for our company. The supervisor didn't say anything, so I assumed there were no issues. It wasn't until after we left the security gate, and we were having a light conversation, that I learned he actually didn't work for our company at all, but for one of our competitors on the same floor. The moment he stated this, I realized the doors were locked and my blood ran cold. He began to tell me how beautiful I was, that I was a real woman, and that he had been watching me for a while. This was about 2 months after I started. I was terrified. I wasn't even sure he would take me to my car. He actually did take me to my car, but did not let me out of the vehicle until I told him when I worked next, and what my number was. I told him our schedules were crazy, as it was the busy summer season, and I had no idea when I worked, or what area I worked next. I ended up telling him I was working in our booth the next day, when I would be working at the parking lot across the street for moving vehicles. And the number I gave him was mine, but with 2 of the numbers switched. After what seemed like a long silence, he lets me out of the vehicle, and I fight every part of me that wants to book it to my car and speed off, so that I wouldn't show him how scared I was. The next day I had a meeting with my manager and told her about what happened. She told me what his name was, and I honestly couldn't remember because I was so scared. I had no idea it wasn't a one-time incident. After he told me he had been watching me, I became increasingly paranoid. How can you tell if you're being watched? I couldn't see him anywhere I worked. 2 weeks later, I'm working an overnight shift in our booth with the vehicles, and he shows up and asks me why I haven't been answering my phone. I told him I had started dating a guy. True. And that I shouldn't be talking to other guys because of it. He tells me that I'm not married, so it shouldn't be a big deal. He was a real man, and he could take care of me. I politely declined, and said something about being very serious about the guy I was dating. He seemed a bit irritated about it and told me that he knows sooner or later the guy will mess up, and that he'll be waiting for me. And then he walked away. There's another period of silence, and a week later, I'm working a late shift until 10 p.m. in the booth downstairs. He walks up to the booth and hands me a coffee, stating he had his father make a bunch of food the other day to drop off for me, but I wasn't there. I told him that was kind of him, but it was unnecessary, and that I was working at a different area. It was then that I noticed a cup of coffee in his hand, and he put it in front of me and said it was my favorite. I always go to the top floor to get the same coffee from the little stand in the facility. And it was exactly as I order it. 16-ounce non-fat white mocha, half sweet with no whipped cream. I tried to refuse it, but he insisted and I accepted it to get him away. I didn't take a sip of it and threw it away when I knew he wasn't around. This continued for 5 months. While I documented what company he worked for, what his name was, and his behavior so honestly, I could get him fired. My manager and co-workers all knew about him, and it got to the point where the contracted company workers would see him about to approach me and either run him off or take me somewhere else. Because of this guy, I hated working any night shifts. The last straw was when he cut me off after I was taking one of our vehicles into our car wash, just so he could talk to me. He literally stood in front of the vehicle I was driving and would not let me pass until I rolled the window down so he could hit on me. I told him I wasn't interested once again, and one of the contracted company workers stopped the guy and told him to stop bothering me. After that, we hired another girl, and a couple of weeks later, she tells me about this 40-something-year-old guy downstairs who gives her the creeps. I knew it was the same guy, and I had enough. My manager hadn't done anything, and I by then knew his name, so I went to his company supervisor and told them everything. They didn't outright fire him at first, but he definitely left us alone after that. After about a month, I learned that he had been fired for doing meth on the job. So, Gary, I'm so happy you no longer work there. Let's not meet again. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to episode 67. Okay, so far this week I'm looking pretty good for another TIFU for Saturday, and I've got plenty of stories for a paranormal story on Friday. It's Thursday, I'm drawing a little bit of a blank at. I was thinking perhaps sleep paralysis. I've sent some messages out for that, but it's, just waiting on seeing what happens there, so that's what I'm thinking, but there's no promise it will indeed be a sleep paralysis video. I haven't really been talking much about subscriber numbers recently, but I just passed the 8,000 not long ago, and that's pretty darn neat, that actually is. I'm always very impressed and very grateful by how well my channel's grown since I started doing this in November. And that is of course due to people, stumbling across my videos and liking them and deciding you want more. And it's also to those of you, and I know there are some of you who have done it, who've actually shared the videos, and if you have done so, thank you so very much. That is a massive help to me when you do that, it really is. Even if just one other person sees that video and subscribes, it's a massive help to me, so thank you so much for that. I think that's about it for now. Recording's all done for the day, which means I can turn the fan back on because it's a bit warm here right now. An unusual thing for Scotland, but we've been enjoying some good weather recently. Been trying to make sure I get out in it because it's good for me. Unlike when I was a teenager when I used to avoid the sunlight. Okay, I think I've chewed your ears enough now, so I'm going to head off. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.